Sir, shall we try? Shrikant, sir. Shrikant, sir. Shall
Yeah,
we, shall we
yeah,
start?
yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Second session today will be handled by Dr. Shrikant Prabhu. To give a brief introduction about the speaker, Dr. Shrikant Prabhu is Associate Professor, Senior Scale in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Manipal Institute of Technology, Manipal. He has been awarded with PhD degree from IIT Kharagpur. His areas of interest are cybersecurity, network security, pattern recognition, pattern classification, fuzzy logic, image processing, parallel processing, and so on. He has been guiding many undergraduates and postgraduates in various fields of computer science stream. He has published several research papers in peer-reviewed international journals and international conferences. He is actively working with students in cybersecurity and network security domains. With this short introduction, I leave the platform to Dr. Shrikant. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Akshay. Good morning, all of you. I hope you're able to see the slides. Akshay, is it visible?
Yes, sir. Visible.
Visible, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, before I start my talk, I will talk about my team who is going to present the different talks and what demos we are going to show for the next 3 days. So today, the beginning part will be introduction to computer forensics or cyber forensics along with cyber laws. So this is my talk for now for another 1 to 1.5 hours. In the afternoon, Dr. Shankar Baknawar from the Department of, one second, yeah, yeah. Yeah, in the afternoon, Dr. Shankar Baknawar from the Department of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology will be talking about cyber forensics. And I put it very clearly, it can also be spelled as computer forensics along with the legal systems. So he will be giving lots of examples of specifically forensics. I'll talk about this word forensics. What does it mean? And when it is connected with the cyber part or the computer part, what are the legal aspects associated? If you have a surveillance camera, if you have cyber threats, if you are having murders, if you have accidents, what are the different interpretations? So those interpretations have to be very clear before we go for tomorrow's session on biometrics, which also will be given by me. So all these words will be explained to you because the exact meaning and scenarios have to be very clear. After Dr. Shankar Baknawar's talk, I will be giving a demo on relatively a new topic in computer forensics, which is called the facial analysis. Right? What is the source of forensics? What is the source of forensic data? What is the source of computer forensics or cyber forensics? Remember, the idea of these talks is not cyber security. I'm not going to talk about the cyber security algorithms. What are the originalities of forensic data, whether it is normal or abnormal? So we'll be ending with facial analysis introduction demos today. And tomorrow we'll be seeing a biometric analysis of the forensic data. And I'm going to show you fingerprinting, face recognition, facial generation. How do we generate faces and try to find out which is the best possibility if a question is asked from a legal perspective to a victim or to a witness. So those kind of things, the implementations I'll be showing you in the morning tomorrow, which will be followed by one very interesting talk on differential privacy in information abuse by Mr. Akshay Jaivital, because that is very much required when you are sending a data from the source to destination and you are putting certain noise into a data, whether the data has been received correctly or no at the destination. So that is what is called differential privacy. That tomorrow we are going to see the combination of these two. Day after tomorrow morning, I am going to give a talk on anthropology and morphology. So I make it very clear, anthropology means bone characteristics and morphology means shape characteristics. So what are the different interpretations? So I'm going to show you a handout day after tomorrow on that, which will be followed by a very, very interesting talk on graphology by my collaborator. His name is Prakash Prabhu from Manipal Technologies. He will be showing you the different interpretations of signatures, handwritings, paragraphs, documents, what are the different interpretations of personalities from documents, paragraphs, signatures, etc., etc., which will be followed by the final demo by me on facial analysis, before which there will be another talk by Dr. Ashwini from Department of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology on artificial intelligence and forensics. So we have linked all our talks, the starting part with me, which will be followed tomorrow with the biometrics, information abuse, and differential privacy, and then it is followed by graphology and AI. Now, coming to the topic major, what do you mean by computer forensics? Specifically, what do you mean by forensic data? Now, when I say forensic data, it means you have data of any object of a person taken over a period of time. Say, like you have the data of my eyes, left eye, right eye. You know it today how it looks. You know 6 months back how it was looking. You know 1 year back how it was looking. Or if you are a friend of mine or you knew me, say 5 years back, how were my eyes looking 5 years back, 10 years back? So these data are called as time series data, right? So whenever you have data of the same object or different objects of a person, or it can be any other entity, it is called as forensic data. Now, what do you mean by computer forensics? Now, if you make an interpretation of these data through a machine, which is called as a computer, or you can put the word cyber when you use networks, basically. So if you interpret all the forensic data through computer or through cyber, I make it very clear, networking with parameters like fingerprints or say faces or retinal data, ECG data, EEG data, all the different interpretations of these on the system, then it becomes computer forensics or cyber forensics. Remember, when I say cyber forensics, it is just an extension over a network. It can be either a remote login PC, or it can be a computer which is connected along with others in a LAN, and the LANs and the LAN or LANs are connected with other LANs, and you look at the source and the destination. Now, what is the theme of this talk, basically? Now, I am going to become an investigator, and I'm going to look at the data which are being sent from the source and being received at the destination, right? And in various kinds of interpretations. So what I thought was, today I'll be just discussing the theoretical part, and then tomorrow not tomorrow, in the afternoon when I show the demos, I'll be talking about the invariant ratios. It becomes very interesting. So this is what a definition is all about. It can be defined simply as a process of applying scientific and analytical techniques to and file structures and determining the potential for legal evidence. So basically, whenever we are talking about computer forensics, one thing comes to our mind, as I already defined, the data which we look at the machine, but that is not enough. We also need to know how the operating systems is functioning or was functioning for that system when any kind of incident happened, and what kind of file structures were there. Now, what do you mean? What do you mean when you say what kind of file structures were there? Now, the meaning of this is basically what type of logins were made in the system. Say suppose I have logged into a system and there has been a suspicion on on a case study that is me. So when there is a suspicion, you are trying to see how many times I have logged in into that system, and also the time at which I have logged in. I'm just saying it is a case study. I'm not saying I am the entity who did that crime, right? Now, why do you need the operating system? Because many a times what happens is when you work on a single computer or a standalone system, you can create various kinds of clients. So any kind of normal data or criminal data, say like any kind of obscene data, can be sent to any other destination, or any kind of data thefts can be done through a single client on a standalone machine. So you need to find out these clients, how they were made in an operating system, how many partitions were made, and from which partition that crime was done. Either of the case, when I am saying in terms of theft or in terms of obscenities of data which are being sent to the destination, right? And what kind of replies are got from the other side. Then only the legal evidences can be made. Now, so these are the different questions which we need to answer. There are a certain set of questions which we need to answer, and there are a certain set of entities which we have, which can be used for answering the questions. So why is evidence identification and preservation required, basically? So when you say evidence, that means you are pretty sure a crime has happened, and here I am saying it is a cyber crime or a computer crime. So now we need to know the source from where that crime has happened. And what do you mean by preservation? Suppose say you assume or you forecast any kind of crime or any kind of computer crime can happen. Can we have certain preservation algorithms such that those crimes can be stopped? Now for that, some type of crimes have to happen. Then we can make a forecasting mechanism such that those type of crimes will not happen anymore. So in mathematics, they say there are certain sets of data which are countably finite or countably infinite or uncountably infinite, blah, 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 blah. So depending on what type of data you have. Now, when I say data, we take the computers as IP addresses and we label them. So in machine learning, you have something called a supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So you label all the systems basically, and you try to see how many systems are there in the LAN or in a particular network. Is it countably finite? That means something like a set of numbers 1, 2, 3. Is it countably infinite 1, 2, 3, dash, dash, dash? So that can happen when different clients are created inside a standalone system. Or it is uncountably infinite, that is 1, 2, either closed set or closed open. That means it is just a infinite set basically. So that can only happen if any particular system or a network has crashed. So these are the different possibilities, right, on which we need to make an evidence identification and also try to find out whether preservation is required. Now, who benefits from computer forensics? Now, here, this question is very, very important. The people who benefit from computer forensics are, one is the organization, right, pertaining to whom the computer forensics is being applied, employees, employers, and also the customers. All right. So basically, if you have a use case called as computer forensics, we need to know the stakeholders who are going to benefit basically. So it is basically the organization. And if at all any incident has happened which is bad, the organization is going to put the legal manifestos so that they can find out what really happened, who did it, and the other benedictions there. Now, general types of forensic examinations requested when any crime has happened. So the forensic examinations which will come into picture specifically in computer forensics are trying to find out the source, the IP address basically, and not trying to find out. Now here the next is a destination, right? Destination anyway you will come to know because a FIR will be filed in the Indian conditions, the first information report in the cyber police. So depending on that, you try to find out the source from where it has been sent. Now there is a very, very hot topic which is coming into existence in biometrics, which is called the keystroke recognition. Right now, basically, whenever you have a computer forensic experiment and you know that computer forensics has to be used because there has been a digital crime or a cyber crime, point number one is these crimes will be committed by fingers. Right, there is no remote mechanism available which can make the keyboard to work basically. So you need to find out the different kinds of weights which has been put by, say, the 5 fingers, 4 index fingers, and the thumb. So if anybody is interested, you can take this topic, keystroke recognition, and trying to find out, trying to map the different weights being put on the keys to the person who is involved from the logbook. It's a very, very interesting proposition. A lot of work has not been done in this area. Then what are the different processes of forensics, specifically computer forensic, and the different tools of trade basically? Now, why is evidence important when you talk about computer forensics? Now, basically, when I said computer forensics, I am saying there is a crime involved. So basically, when you want to prove that something is a crime first and then a cyber crime, you need to have an evidence basically. Right now, what do you mean by evidence? It is called as a clue. Right. Without having a clue, you cannot proceed in that particular case basically. So evidence is used to establish facts. Now, what kind of evidences we have in computer crimes or cyber forensics or computer forensics basically? Right, computer crimes are different, computer forensics are different. When I am saying forensics, basically it is a broader aspects of crime, data of the same object taken over a period of time. Now evidences can be facial images which can be taken from the surveillance cameras, because when you present a case in the court, the first question which will be asked from the jury is, try to produce the machine which has been used to take that particular photograph, or try to produce the camera. The second question which will be asked by the jury in the court is, what are the different resolutions involved? What type of films were used? because finally at the end of the day you need to prove that person who is involved is the person who is involved in the crime, right? So the different types of objects which are involved, right? So for that we need to create evidences like the cameras, on the cameras fingerprints, right? And when you open the camera, when you get the whole what is that the whole film, trying to find out the different faces, right, which are involved, etc., etc. And the last one is forensic examiner is not biased. So remember, the whole aspect of this talk is or are the legal aspects on the computer programming, what we do on the forensic data. Now, who needs computer forensic? This is very interesting. All right. First is the victim, second is the law enforcement agency, third is the insurance carriers, and last is the legal system. Now, the victim involved in a particular crime, right, requires computer forensics. Now, when I say computer forensics, digital data, I can give you lots of examples here. One example which happened in 1992. It is called the not 1992, 1991. The Shankar Guha Neogi murder case. This happened in a place called as Bhilai in Chhattisgarh, in a steel plant there, right? He was a labor union leader and he was murdered. That is in the midnight. At that time, there were no surveillance cameras. So it was said when the case went to the court, right? At that time also there were some typewriters and they could take some typewritten data and use it for producing the case in the court. But what really happened was when the case was being solved, because of lack of evidence in terms of computer evidences, it took a lot of time to give a jury report. It took almost 25 years. So after 25 years, the people who were really involved, there were 2 or 3 industrialists who were involved in this particular murder, they were acquitted. And the person who was hired to commit the crime, and the pistol also which was hired from the country called as Nepal, he got into trouble and he was put inside prison. And even he could not produce an evidence saying that I was hired by somebody, because there was a lack of computer evidences. There was a lack of images on that particular spot, like who committed that particular crime. Only data which they got was the fingerprints on the pistols, and from the fingerprints they could make certain judgments, and then the jury went on asking questions right forth, by which the person who committed the crime got into trouble, but the people who hired were acquitted. So here it becomes very important to get computer forensics into picture, or cyber forensics into picture, because there is a cyber crime. Now law enforcement agency, like the example which I gave you, to produce a legal statement, right, using a set of clauses, right? If there is a fingerprint on a particular object, and if this particular face is seen, or this particular victim is involved, and this particular victim, so this becomes a rule basically. So there are certain predicates which we put, right, depending on the evidences, and then we make a legal statement, and we see for that legal statement whether each predicate gives a true or false question, and at the end the answer should be true from the Boolean symbols. The insurance carriers, so insurance carriers are very important, because the insurance money has to be committed to the victim or even to the witness, because if in the case the witness, hello, yeah, any questions, right? Okay, yeah. So if there is any insurance claim, or if there are any insurance claims from the victim or the witness, like if the victim was harassed in the court of law for a long time, then the amount of money which has to be given to the victim from the court jurisdiction will depend on the insurance carriers. Same thing holds good for the witness. Or if a person has been held to be a criminal, and if he has been proved or she has been proved not to be a criminal, and the case has been going for a long time, so the number of years or the number of days the case has undergone, that particular person who has been upheld for being a criminal will get some insurance amount, because he has been innocent. So this can be in either of the case, either the victim gets it, or the witness gets it, or the person who is standing as a criminal and who is facing the court. So it depends how the case basically goes. So this is very important here. Then, so there's a difference between law enforcement and the legal system. When I say law enforcement, you have to make those rules, right? Depending on the different sections what we have in the legal system. I'll show you at the end of my talk with some of the sections. I will not tell you everything about it. That will be done in the next talk in the afternoon. So when we make a set of rules, those rules are being used by the jury. So there comes the legal system basically. All right. So basically, if anybody of you is interested either in working on computer forensics or working on the legal aspects of computer forensics, you can take it as a PhD work, because a lot of automation is required, either in terms of only textual data or in terms of image. And as images are basically, all right, and that's the basic source from where the data is originating, either a fingerprint or a face, mainly in Indian perspective. All right. Now, who are the victims basically? So they are all the private business partners, government agencies, and private individuals. So I can give you here lots of examples basically. When you take, say, government agencies, say like companies like Steel Authority of India Limited, or say companies like Coal India Limited. Coal India basically deals with natural resources. Steel Authority of India Limited deals with basically steel for making rails and for making wheels. So what usually happens is, if it is a government undertaking, there can be a private company, there can be a private steel company or a private coal company who will hack the government records and try to find out what kind of goods in the government undertaking they are making, what kind of railway lines they are making, what kind of railway wheels they are making, and copy those design perspectives and make it to be implemented in their company. So basically, they are just taking a copy what is happening in the government undertaking and make it to work in their company. So what happens is, it is going against the copyrights of the company, and there can be a legal lawsuit which can be filed from the government undertaking on that particular private company. Many a times it happens. Many a times these cases are not seen. Things get carried away, but when things become serious, when there are a lot of copyright infringements, then the problem starts basically. So this is what the combination of private business enterprises, government enterprises, and private individuals. All right. Because when I say private individuals, they are all the enterprised people who are running the private businesses. So we are not going to talk about individuals in the government undertaking, because in the government undertaking, finally, it is the government of India, specifically in the Indian perspective, who is doing the whole business. So there's a lot of link between who can be the victim. So either one of them here. All right. Now, this is one example which I hospital confirms copying of patient files by the hacker. So this has happened in one of the very famous hospital chain in America, right? And what the hacker has done is, he or she, I will not release the name here, he or she has tried to hack certain patient records, right, from that particular hospital, right? And they have tampered the data. Now, why they have done that? Remember, in the developed countries, all the health informatics data and all the healthcare management data or all the healthcare information systems data, they are all automated. Patients' data, blood pressure readings, blood sugar readings, cholesterol readings, thyroid readings, other orthopedic readings, etc., they are all automated. Suppose, say, I visit an American hospital and I'm an American citizen, say from last 25 years, my data for all my visits are recorded in the last 25 years. So that when I visit next time, I don't have to produce a manual record. Right. So there are pros and cons. Now, what are the pros and cons? You get better treatments because you know 25 years back how your data was. And you can say they are all forensic data. Because remember, forensic does not always mean crimes. If you put the word crime, that means forensic is crime. But forensic has got two parts basically, right? First is the normal data and second is the abnormal data. And when I'm saying abnormal, they are basically all the crime data is what I'm talking about. So what happens is, yes, your healthcare data are stored so you get better treatments, but there is a side ill effect here. Now, what is a side ill effect? If your data are tampered, right, say from 2000 to 2010, all your data have been erased by somebody, not only yours, 90% of the patients who have visited that particular hospital, they are all erased. So what happens is, doctors then will not have a clear-cut picture of what you were between 2000 and 2010. Say suppose your disease started in 2010. So doctors will know only the diseased characteristics of the patients. So what the hackers will do is, whatever your normal data are, they will delete it fully, all the patients. They will try to delete. basically all the patients to different clients. So what happens is when only deceased data is available, the doctor treatments will go on only the deceased characteristics. So there is a very high likely chance your treatments can get faltered, and your disease might increase, or you will have certain serious repercussions, and the hospital name will go. The hospital name will get tarnished. So this is one way. So what the hospitals do is they keep a backup data, as we all know. Now Google has got a backup Google Colab where they store all the healthcare data specifically first, right? In terms of the armed forces and in terms of citizens of different countries. So this is the way. So this is one particular example where I'm just saying how cyber forensic becomes very handy in a particular role. Now, FBI sites left open for the hackers access. Now, let me talk about this. As you all know, in the year 2001, the World Trade Center was attacked, right? And this is, I'm just giving as an example, basically, right? And we all know that internet came into existence in the year 1994. It is not that internet was not existing before 1994. It was existing in terms of ARPANET in America, developed countries, and in India also it was existing before 1994. It was called as ERNET, ERNET. Yes, it was there before the 1990s also, but it was not open to all the organizations. Only few public sector undertakings were having this concept of ERNET, ERNET, which were called as hotlines, basically. Right? Hotlines do exist today also, but with certain kind of improvements, basically. So when this incident happened, World Trade Center, they did a forensic investigation, right? So from the forensic investigation report, they found out that they had a threat. They had a threat that buildings will be attacked by certain missile objects around 10 years before the incident happened. In 1994, in 1997, in 1999, they knew it, but they did not know what will be those missile objects and what will be those buildings which will be attacked, right? I'm not naming any country here. This is just an academic example I am giving. So basically what I am saying is there have been hackings on different websites, specifically the ARPANET websites, to find out what are the different types of buildings which are there in the developed countries, specifically in the US, and also what are the different vulnerabilities for those buildings. Because if they get the loopholes, then attacks become easy. So this is what this talks all about. So basically, when any kind of computer crime happens, there are certain clues or there are certain evidences which are left behind. And we need to know those evidences before we go into the cyber laws, basically, right? And remember, I'm talking about both normal data and crime data. Now let us talk about this. Home workers can imperil systems. These are the days of COVID-19. And when I'm saying COVID-19, it is a pandemic. And now I'm not going to talk about pandemics which happened, say, 100 or 120 years back, like smallpox. And because this question I usually ask, if this pandemic called COVID-19 had happened 25 years back, what we people would have done? Because there were no online platforms. Forget about taking online classes or doing any online transactions. How life would have been? And I did ask this question to certain people. Was God kind enough to give this disease this year? This question might be very vague, but it has got a lot of implications. All right. So listen to my question very clearly. Had this pandemic happened 25 years back, right? And the second question is, was God kind enough to give this pandemic this year? God forbid it happens, basically. I put that clause later. Right. Now, in this particular slide, what I'm trying to impress upon the people is there are certain remote logins for organizations like Microsoft, right? So there was a person in Russia who was using, and he was employed, right, online, right? And this happened during the COVID-19 time only. So when I am saying working online, the company is there in Moscow, basically, but they are working online through a remote login. And certain kind of documents from Microsoft, they were hacked, right? Specifically datas pertaining with the operating systems, because somebody was trying to emulate the Microsoft operating system somewhere in Russia or somewhere there, basically trying to make their own operating system, right? So basically there are a lot of legal implications here, but they could not take it legal. Microsoft could not take this incident legally because they could not find out who the person was. They found the IP address because they could find the region from where that particular hacking was done, but they could not find out who the person was because there was not proper login registers which were maintained. So this is another problem what we can have if we have a remote login. employees themselves can create problems for the organization. That's what I said. Who are the people who are employed, who are required for computer forensics? So those three, what I pointed out here, these three basically. So we have to look at that, right? Now, what are the reasons for forensic analysis? Right, one is the ID, the source ID, what I call the perpetrator basically, right? And when I say ID, the perpetrator, there is a methodology involved by that particular perpetrator. Now, when I say a methodology, usually a perpetrator will not commit a crime by coming and sitting on the system on that particular day. They will watch that system for a long time, for 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years before. They will try to find out who are the people who are using that system continuously, right? They will mark those people. They will take photographs of those people, either by becoming their friends through their mobiles. Usually people do it, and you will not come to know at all that the person who is taking your photographs is going to commit a crime one particular day through the system where you are sitting. So that is why I'm saying ID becomes the perpetrator. So this is one evidence, right? That is why when this case is put in the court, mobile phones will be seized of that particular victim. And all the photographs, they will have the time also, time of taking the photograph. It will all be noted basically, right? This is one way of locating that particular person. Or the victim who is caught, say I'm sitting on the system and I become the victim falsely. So questions will be asked once again. Have you seen anybody who has been watching you? And this is what happened in the World Trade Center in 2001. The people who committed those crimes, one or two of them, they were watching that security gate for 3 months, starting from May till July. Right? It's for academic interest I'm talking about. So this is what it is. Now, conduct a damage assessment of the victimized network. Now, when I say this, basically, if at all data has been sent in a network to a group of people, right? By doing any kind of crime, it can be phishing, it can be hacking, security. So we make an assessment like how many systems have been affected. When I say systems have been affected, I'm not talking about the virus files and worm files which are entering. So that can be point number one, basically. Even virus files, worm files which come along with cyber crimes, it is a part of cyber forensics, basically. Point number two is the person who is sitting or who are sitting before the system, how damaged they are, how much reputation theirs has got affected. So that you will come to know from the organization. So all these things will be done by the legal adjudicators. So these days, even the legal adjudicators will have softwares, right? They will have use cases, they will have classes already designed to work on the organization where they are seeing the crime. So organization also have softwares, right? They have softwares related to forensic analysis and the cyber police. So police will come into picture, the legal lawyers will come into picture, and the organization will be coming into picture, right? Where the crime has been committed. And it is all done through the computer system, either standalones today are not being used. They are all done in a network, right? Now, what are the different types of forensic requests you can have? So this is very important to be analyzed, right? First is the intrusion analysis. So what type of intrusions have happened, right? Is it that your financial data has been manipulated, right? That means your bank data. That means your computer has not been attacked, but your account in a particular bank has been attacked, basically, right? So this is one possibility. Or is it that your property documents have been attacked, because all your property documents, say like your housing, your land, it is all automated. It is there in some of the corporation offices in the government of India. So from the corporation officer, somebody has found out how much land you are having, and there some manipulations have been done, and some of the lands are not there now in your names. So is it that? So property dealings, financial data, or personal attacks, basically your family has been attacked, your children have been attacked. They are called as juvenile computer forensics, juvenile crimes, basically, right? Or your spouse, your parents, or whoever it is, basically. So there are different types of categories on which you can have intrusions, basically, in computer forensics, basically. Remember, I'm talking about computer forensics, right? I'm looking through a machine. Now, after you have done an intrusion analysis, the damage assessment, like how much financial fraud has happened, which is causing you effect, or how much property fraud has happened, or how much your children have been affected, and that you come to know from their teachers. Their teachers will tell that your child is looking a little bit depressed, or your child looks a little bit obsessed. So there is a psychological analysis done on your children, and then they reveal. So sometimes it is called as narco analysis in computer forensics. All right. So they put a machine in the hospital, in the psychiatry department, and they try to find out like what that child underwent when he or she was sitting before the computer and trying to respond to somebody in a visual way or a textual way. So it is very, very important. It's called as narco analysis and lie detector test. So these two are done by the cyber police, and these are also automated. Then comes suspect examination. So once the intrusion analysis and damage assessment has been done, the suspects will be examined. And when you say suspects here, they are not the physical human beings alone, but first they are the machines. So machines will be analyzed first, and then the physical human beings, if there have been proper legal records associated. So there are various local domains, like for SIM cards, there are private companies. So when there are local domains, those private companies will be inquired first by the cyber police. Like this IP address, does it belong to your particular domain? And once that answer comes, then they will inquire who bought this particular domain, right? And all other things, because people make frauds when they buy even the IP addresses. Their names will not be stored. It is happening in many Indian states these days, but these days it has reduced, but it was happening 10 or 15 years back. Okay, right. So once the suspects have been examined, a log file analysis is done. How many times that particular suspect has logged in that particular system? So that can be easily done by seeing the operating system records, and then look at the evidences given by the victims, by the witnesses, by the medical doctors, and the log files, and try to come to a conclusion to make an arrest. So these are all the types of forensic requests which can happen, and these are not physical these days. These are all done through computer systems. So when you are doing through computer systems, the legal harassments reduces because you don't meet the person physically at the first sight. So you come to a proof and then you arrest the person. It becomes very logical, basically, right? Now, when you say intrusion analysis, basically, right? Who gained the entry? What did they do? When did this happen? So that I will show you in demo, right? Now, when I say who gained entry, so you need to have certain kind of facial data. Facial data. Now, I am not talking about, I am not talking about face recognition. I'll be talking about facial analysis. So can we have certain ratios possible? Something like, I will show you now itself what kind of ratios they are. Tip of forehead to tip of chin, right? Line you draw. Then the tip of left chin and tip of right chin, basically. So you take a ratio of these two distances. So one becomes vertical, one becomes horizontal. So these type of ratios are many on a face, because when you say who gained entry, you need a surveillance camera to capture that particular face. And surveillance camera, many a times it fails in India because the images are not very clear, the resolutions are not very clear, and it can be easily put in the court that the person who is being seen through the camera image is not the person whom we have brought as a criminal. So it can be easily proved because the images are not clear. So basically, we need to do certain type of analysis. So when we say analysis, it becomes more micro. Micro means inside the face, certain kind of ratios on distances, basically, right? So what did they do? So when you say what did they do, we need fingerprint data here, right? So like keystroke recognition. So if they have hit a keyboard, right? Suppose they clicked on A. So which type of finger has hit on A? Is it the leftmost index finger or is it the thumb? So there are lots of forecasting you can do, right? Because usually criminals, what they do is they will not use the correct finger for the correct key on the keyboard. So if you have a logbook and you have suspicion, then you can prove it through keystroke recognition by making that particular person who has committed the crime on whom the suspicion is there to once again click on the keys, and then you see the weights. So you do some kind of weight matching. So these are called as ground truth data. So what do you mean by ground truth data? If there is suspicion on somebody, make that person to click on those keys once again and take the previous recordings and superimpose it with the current recordings. But that suspicion what police get has to come through an evidence. So the evidences have been given very clearly here, right? One second. Right. So it has been given very clearly. So this gives all the evidences basically once you do this. So we are talking about this. So when did this happen and all this? So these answers will be given, right? Now damage assessment. So when you say computer forensics, so I'm going point by point, right? First one is intrusion analysis and second is damage assessment. So once you know there is an intrusion, just go fast now. What was available for the intruder to see? Because intruder will not commit a crime if he or she does not see an object on whom the crime is intended. Because if the object on whom the crime is intended is not there, the intruder will not send any kind of messages, either in terms of images or textual data. Right? I will give you certain examples for them. And even in the afternoon, Dr. Shankar Baknamar is going to give certain examples, very good examples there, case studies. All right. So this is very, very important here. And remember, all the evidences are seen through the computer. So what did he take? So when I say what did he take means like what he has succeeded to commit basically. Was he able to succeed in sending any kind of obscene data, or was he able to steal any kind of data in terms of finances or in terms of properties or anything else basically? And what kind of clue he left behind? Because from there the cyber, so remember, cyber police will come into picture here. So legal lawyers, cyber police, the customers in the organization, and also the employees. So these three we are targeting basically, right? So what did he leave behind? Any clues? And where did he go? Because we are searching for that particular person, right, to be produced in the code. So damage assessment basically talks about these questions. So these questions are a little bit very abstract, right? The questions has been put in such a way not to give any information about the victim, but trying to give information mainly about the intruder, right? So this is what it is basically. Now, when I say file recovery, so this is what all can happen. So we see a lot of movies, right? And we have seen certain examples of movies in the last 15 to 20 years when any suspicion is there on a person as a criminal, and when that person comes to know that there is suspicion, and if that suspicion is through a computer machine, so that particular person on whom the suspicion is there will go to that particular computer and try to delete all the files which he used on that particular day. So remember, the person who commits a computer crime is very tech savvy. And usually these days, all are tech savvy to use computers. Might not be to know the intricate details. So all the files which he or she used on that particular day, right? Even the hidden files, because when there are hidden files, there can be certain clues left behind of that particular person's IP addresses, which are called as the MIME headers basically. Okay, I'm not talking about the MAC addresses there. Okay, slack space. When I say slack space, how much empty space was there in the system before that particular person sat on that particular system, or how much slack space is there afterwards? This makes very little sense for the person who is committing the crime and trying to recover that slack space or remove that slack space. It is not easy for that particular person to do. So basically from slack space, lot of clues the cyber police can get, right? And then the bad blocks, because blocks also will get affected, because when the passwords are hacked, right? So a lot of algorithms will be written using cryptography, which can make good blocks into bad blocks. Because when you're trying to hack passwords, you write algorithms in such a way that viruses get introduced or worms get introduced. And then there are others also like Trojan horses, viruses, worms, Trojan horses. So these three are very important concepts in computer forensics. They don't come directly from the computer, that criminal, but they get induced in the system when any kind of password is hacked. And those passwords can be either textual data or they can also be images, because many a times images also are sent as passwords basically. Steganography, this becomes very handy to understand that particular person who has committed the crime, because many a times what happens these days, right? Password hacking is a bygone conclusion. Nobody does that these days to commit big crimes. So what people do is, who are very smart, they use images and they introduce certain kind of extra data. Say suppose any hacker puts my image at the source and sends it to the destination. So before sending it to the destination, he will or she will introduce some data in my image, which will find certain crucial objects from the destination. So basically, the crime data which are being sent from the source is not my image. They are all the data which are hidden inside that particular image, right? So they are called as collages, basically. So inside the collage, there can be certain micro data, like the criminal wants certain kind of passwords for the bank accounts. So inside my image, those passwords will be written in an encrypted form, and that will reach the destination, not to the person intended, but to the bank where the person is having an account, basically. So we need to understand where it is going. So this is the way, basically. So this is sometimes called as phonography, right? So phonography is not intended to be part of our talks this time, but might be next time we will introduce it, because I just started working on this particular topic. Then there are hardware devices which can be spoiled, like X drives and Windows NT file systems, which are none of the business for the people who are committing the crimes and on whom the suspicion is. So basically, if you want to find any kind of clues, there will be deleted files, hidden files, then it will be steganographic data. That's all, these three, right? Now, this is one particular example or one particular window which is being shown. The software used is the shelf software, right? So this particular software, when the program was run, it found out like how many files were deleted, right? When a particular bank account was hacked, right, from one of the this was one of the very important banks. I forgot the name of the bank. It is in the US, basically. So how many files were deleted? Not only on the source but also on the destination, basically, right? Now on the source, the files were deleted because the person who committed that particular crime physically from that particular computer did not want to leave any clue. So all the physical files at that particular time, specifically the log files, they were all deleted. Then on the destination, right, the files of the particular accounts, they were all deleted, right? So we need to retrieve those deleted files, basically, to try to find out like really what happened. So for that, we need to find out the local IP address, basically, of the destination machine. So the IP address they have retrieved is 169.255.1.194, basically, because there were many clients created on that particular system. So they need to find out the correct IP address from where those files were deleted, right? Now, what are the different utilities which are involved specifically for computer forensics, right? Utilities means the tools available. So one is the disk search, right? So disk search and file list, they are basically linked. So when I say file list, how many files are there? How many free lists are there? Why do we need the free list? Because you will check the free list the day before the crime happened, right? How much space was there in the free list, and how much free list space is there today? So if it has reduced or if it has increased. If it has reduced due to a computer crime, you will try to find out whether viruses, worms, or Trojan horses have come inside. Or else, if it has reduced, what was the other thing which was induced by that cyber criminal? So these are some of the utility shareholders. One is disk and file list, which are very, very important. Basically, for the same thing, what I showed you just now, disk, files, slacks, and the operating system, right? Right. So these are the three different things on which we look on, right? The NTFS streams. One is called the file access time finder. At what time the files were accessed, because you found that some files have been deleted either at the source or at the destination. So different times possible. Then the hidden data inside those files. Okay, so that is also very, very important, because what type of data have been induced or what type of data have been removed on both sides. So these are the different commands what are there, basically, right, for the forensic tools, basically, right? Right. Now, before I go further, I will show you certain images, because the next part is on images. I'm just going through the different possibilities of computer forensics. So I'll show you certain images because I'll be using them for the demos, right? Right. 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 So what are the different touch data what you will have for computer forensics, right? Because before you use a machine, right, in any organization, your fingerprint has to be swapped. So this is how any digital fingerprint will look like, right? Usually you will not get a fingerprint so clear from the spot where the crime has happened, basically, all right? So this is what is a clear fingerprint. Now, when we talk about the digital data, specifically digital fingerprints, this is the macro data, right? I will talk about it in my demos. And the micro data are these. These are bifurcations, right? This line breaks into two. These are called bifurcation points, right? You have so many bifurcations like that. Then you have got lines. Can you see this? These are called as ridge lines, right? So a lot of work is going on to enhance these data in computer forensics, right? Because you can see the shape of these objects. These are all capital Y's. This is Y, capital Y. And what is this? This is just a single line. You can call it to be, say, on a keyboard, it will look like capital I, or it can look like a 1. Now, what interpretations you have from this data? So I can use these features from a digital fingerprint. I can reuse them. Now, how I can reuse them? Whatever feature analysis I do on this data, say it is say capital 1, I can reuse them on textual data, because capital 1 can also be a textual data which has got an ASCII value, basically. All right. So basically code reusability is possible. Now, when I say capital Y, right? Now, this has also got a textual interpretation. Now, what is one textual interpretation? If I write capital Y in an English sentence, so whatever feature analysis I do here, I reuse it there. In a grid, it is called as grid computing. I can use a 3 by 3 matrix, a 4 by 4 matrix, a 5 by 5 matrix, and try to interpret what shapes I have. So this is the idea of my talk day after tomorrow: anthropology and morphology. Morphology means working on shapes and what interpretations we have. Because when I am saying computer forensics, the first part was theoretical, and whatever I spoke about there was either touch data or data which can be seen. So when I see touch data, it is through fingerprint. I'm not talking about a victim or a criminal or cyber police or a legal lawyer or the organization. I'm looking at the technical part now, how I'm going to solve it, basically. So when I look at this digital data, I can use the same information for a textual data. Now, what other kinds of digital data you can have, right? Other kinds of textual data you don't have much interpretation about, but you can make those interpretations from this is a biometric, basically biological property interpreted through a measure. You have another biometric called a retinal data, wherein you can get capital T, right half T, left half T. So you can generate as many number of characters possible, right? So what happens is when you are using any digital data, you can connect your keyboard, because all the normal data sent through a computer is through a keyboard by a person, or even the abnormal data which are criminal data are through a keyboard by a person. So you have got the fingerprint data of the person. You can use certain micro properties for the keyboard. So if you get another biometric, any advanced biometric, say like a retinal data, I said you can interpret more number of shapes like capital Y. I'll just show it now. Capital T, right half T, left half T, like that. So this is one digital data which you have, basically. Mind you, you can't get these data directly from the crime scene, basically. All right. Okay. Now, before I go further, I'll tell you what the I'll also tell you the different types of fingerprints. It is called as whir, loop, and arc. So there are three types of fingerprints, basically. All right. Now I'll just go into another aspect here and show you that. Right. Very interesting. Right. So all these data have been captured through cameras. I was speaking about cameras when I told theoretically about computer forensics, right? Now, you cannot capture a fingerprint through a camera, but a facial data, yes. And these were captured through a camera, right? Some of them. But these days, nobody will capture images of any particular big organization in terms of work through only cameras. They will use a surveillance camera. So the methodology what I used say around 15 or 12 years back is the same what we use today. So some data of different parts of the face have been captured. This is called face snap. This is very much required for computer forensics, right? To make any interpretations. I'm not saying about criminal interpretations. To record the information of the employees, of the customers, or of the guests, or of the politicians, etc., etc. This is called as a forehead, right? This is another information which is stored. This is called as a mouth information. Now, what I'll be showing you in my demos as I proceed today and day after tomorrow is I'm going to stitch these three. I am going to stitch this and with this, and I'll generate an image of a person. When I generate that, I'm a computer engineer. When I generate that, so there will be certain set of jury people sitting, right? They will ask the questions to the victim and the witness. Is this the person? Is this the person? Is this the person? So there will be a lot of permutations, combinations. So say suppose any crime has happened in an ATM machine. Say somebody has stolen money from a person and it has been recorded from a surveillance camera. So from a surveillance camera, these three particular parts have been captured, right? Or this particular part has been captured. This has been captured. This has been captured, or this has been captured. So these are all, can you look at these particular images? They look to be images of real criminals. They are actually mess workers of IIT Kharagpur. I took them because I wanted to show certain case studies which will represent criminals. These data I could get very easily, but criminal data usually the police stations and CBI people, they don't release so easily, right? So this is what it is. So can you make interpretations of a surveillance camera data, right? When you have these parts, only parts basically, then you stitch it basically. Now, when you look at these particular data, what kind of features we have? So if basically, right, be a Y shape, right? You almost like a Y shape. If you take this basically, it becomes an ellipse basically. Or if you take an iris, it becomes a circle. So these are all morphological characteristics, what you have of a forensic data basically, right? And remember, all these things you are seeing through a machine, right? Now, can you see these particular parts of the face? Here bones will come, right, on the forehead. Here cheekbones. So these are called as anthropological characteristics. So there are anthropological characteristics which are bone characteristics, right, which is required for computer forensics to do a better investigation, or you have got morphological characteristics to do a better investigation. So this will be my talk day after tomorrow. So this is how it is. So you can make a lot of interpretations from these particular data. What other shapes you can interpret basically? You can look at these eyebrows, right? So these eyebrows also, they can be elliptical in nature basically, right? And then you can try to use these shapes on any other particular biometric data. Okay, so this is how it looks like. So I've shown you one is touch and one is by look. Next, I go to the next one now, the last one, and then I'll go back to the slides. Right. See, whenever I show any data, I said it is all crime data. So you need to understand which kind of crime you can use which biometric data, right? So I'll show you two more, retinal, gastrointestinal, and what kind of crimes you can associate with each biometric data. And that too crimes committed through a computer, basically, right? That is very, very important here, right? All the literatures, they basically claim on that, right? Right. I'll just show you one retinal data, right? So for this particular data, where and all this data can be captured in an airport, right? So airports have ophthalmoscope machines because these data cannot be changed, right? In airports, in shopping malls, in developed countries these days, they have retinal machines. It's like a gun, and they capture these data. These cannot be changed here. So you can see certain features here: optic disc. This is called as a cup. These are all the vessels. These are all bifurcations. Can you see? So this is like fingerprint. This feature basically. Here you can get even something like this and this. This is not a bifurcation. This is called as a crossover, right? This is a bifurcation basically. You can see this now, this and this. This is capital T. This is capital T basically, right? You have a capital T shape here. What other shapes are possible? Then you can use it on some other datas basically, right? You can have right half T also. Somewhere I can show you this one. Can you see this? This going like this, right half T. So like that you can have left half T. So imagine how many alphabets you are generating basically. What I mean to say is to do a the keystroke recognition or any textual data which are sent as images. Now forget about the keystroke recognition, because keystroke recognition, the different keys have got specific shapes. They don't change. Capital Y will not change. Capital T will not change. So you can't find out who the person is who has sent that particular data from keystrokes. It becomes difficult by using these algorithms. But yes, if somebody writes something on a paper, scans it and sends it, then yes, you can use these kinds of algorithm. But if you are looking at keystrokes through the keyboard, then you have to look at the weight applied those by those particular fingers. So that is called as gesture recognition, gestures of different fingerprints basically, right? So there are different gestures on different fingers basically. Then you can find out what kind of weight was applied on that particular key at that particular time for sending a message. And then if any suspicion is there on a particular person, you make that person to once again click on that particular key by using all the fingers. Note it, find the ground truth, and then try to do a match basically. It becomes very interesting. And the last data before I proceed further, medical data which I would like to show you, which are being used these days for committing crimes basically, are called as gastrointestinal data. They look like this basically, right? So these days, when people travel from one country to another country, specifically some criminals who are carrying certain suspicious objects. So what they do is they send some kind of imaginary emails through false email IDs to the destination, and those destination people are friends of theirs. So they will tell that particular person that we are getting such and such data, but the source of the email, that is the email ID, cannot be traced by the investigative agency. So how do they then find, suppose a person is caught in the airport with some suspicious objects. So they look at your stomach part. Where are these suspicious objects hidden? So that's what. So there was an investigation done. I'm just telling you academically, the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case, 1991. The reports came just around 5 years back. And they said whether it is a suicide bombing or human bombing. So there is a difference between suicide bombing and human bombing. Wearing something outside, putting something inside. So those days, we did not have any surveillance camera or very good even scanners like MRI scanners or CT scanners for finding out these kind of crimes. But these days, we are having a lot of good, there's a very good word for that, inner scanner machines, which can see your stomach part. That is the esophagus, your stomach, large intestine, small intestine, and try to find out whether there are any vasculature changes here. If there are any vasculature changes here, if they are becoming very abnormal, that means there are certain objects which have been embedded inside your stomach. So immediately they will ask for an endoscopy and they try to find out what kind of objects have been embedded inside. And this is what is the target of the next set of crimes. If anybody wants to commit, they say one is bioterrorism, that is through agriculture, and second is called as human terrorism, that is getting objects embedded inside, right? So they see for all these vasculature changes. Now when you look at these vasculatures, once again, you don't have to do any particular study on these particular images. You can reuse the vasculatures what you have on the retinal data, or you can reuse the shapes from fingerprints. They are all capital Y's here. You can see even you will have T's, you have light of T, etc., etc. So this is the way we look at any computer forensic data, which is touch data or which is captured through a camera or which is captured through a specific machine, like a retinal machine, specifically in the airports, right? So you will get a lot of informations, right? Once it is stored, because once you go inside a particular city and the data is stored, so it becomes a logbook. So if there is any suspicion of any email being sent from any particular place from where the particular person doesn't belong to, then you have the logbook there and you can map it basically. All right. So this is what it is. Right. Right. So the log file analysis, what it means. So I'm looking at these points itself, right? These points itself I am looking at. So we have finished all this. So coming to the last part now. Yeah. Log file analysis. How do we do? Right. Right. So all these analyses will be shown you in one case study, that is day after tomorrow in graphology, right? Different signatures, different handwritings, different documents. We will show you the Sushant Singh Rajput case, right? All those different murder cases, suicide cases. So we'll show you day after tomorrow, right? How those data were stored inside the computer, how documents written by Sushant Singh Rajput was stored. Then there are 2 or 3 more cases, right? Then we will show you some cases which happened abroad, certain signatures, right? We will show you signatures of Bin Laden, how it looks, basically. What are the interpretations? And how do you make a psychological analysis from a log file? So all those things, basically, right? Today, I'm just telling you the theory. So that will be done by Prakash Prabhu, one of my collaborators. So what are the different events? What events are monitored? What are the event records revealed? And all these things, basically. So this I need not have to tell you, basically. So these get stored, basically, right? Then the evidence search. Now comes the main thing. So everything has been done. So image files. So I've shown you certain images, basically. You search for evidences. That means you need feature analysis. Then you need matching, basically, right? Then only the cyber police can say that there is a cyber crime, wherein computer forensics will come into picture. Why computer forensics will come into picture? Because your forensic data, which is captured through a computer. So once the cyber police says there is a cyber crime, the cyber, the legal, the cyber experts, that is the legal experts in cyber laws, they will come into picture, and then a decision will be made. So one of the person who is very affluent with cyber laws is Pawan Duggal, right? He was one of the inventors of cyber laws in India. Remember, they are not the manual laws which we are looking at. We are not deciding anything manually. So one is image files. I told you software applications. What type of software applications were used? So for that, you have to have the logbooks and deleted files, hidden files, encrypted files, hidden partitions. So these are all I have already told you, right? Right. Now, what is a forensic process we have, basically, right? So this will be done by the cyber police. So preparation of a report, basically. A report has to be made depending on the evidences. You will take the victim, you will take the witness evidence, and you will take also statements from the suspected person or a group of persons, basically. And you will prepare a report. Now, how do you prepare the report? Victims, different data you will capture, either fingerprint or faces, and the data what is received by the victim at the destination, right? Either an email or any kind of obscene images or any kind of obscene text or any kind of threatening messages or any kind of email abuses, etc., etc. All this. So I told you all of them. So you make one report, you jot it down, a requirement specification report, basically. Take the witness statement also. Now, who is the witness? Now, a witness is a person who will say that that particular person who is a victim was using that particular system. So that will be usually in an organization, your boss, basically, project leader or project manager. So they are the people who will say that, because they will have the attendance records through a fingerprint machine, right? Because every organization these days use a fingerprint machine for the employees to go inside, right? After these reports are made, then you will take the statements of this one, the person who has committed the crime on whom you have the suspicion, basically, right? So there will be a defense lawyer, basically, for that. So he the defense lawyer also will be a cyber expert, basically. So the defense lawyer will talk with the government lawyer for the victim. So a government lawyer, a defense lawyer, both are cyber experts here, basically, right? On the different sections. I'll show you the sections just now. So this is what is. So these are all the things what we do in preparation, different statements. Confirm the authority to conduct analysis. Verify the purpose of analysis. So here the people are involved who are suspected. Ensure that sterile media is available and utilized for imaging. When you say sterile media, they are all digital data. So digital data usually will be all very clear. So so you get all the digital data from forensic science labs, right? Forensic science labs. So in India, in every state we have it, and the Central Forensic Science Laboratory is in Delhi, right? And then you have different labs for even different biometrics. There are fingerprinting labs specifically. There are DNA labs specifically, right? Then there are labs only for facial recognition. There is a private company in Delhi which is called the Sherlock Institute of Forensic Sciences. So they work on computer facial forensic data, basically, right? I attended a workshop there. So this is what it is. So ensure that sterile media is available. So that means whatever investigation is done or whatever data you are preparing, you are not preparing it from the data which you get from the crime site. So you get the data from a forensic science lab after all the pre-processings have been done, and ensure that all the software tools utilized for the analysis are tested. So this is what is done even in an election also. When political elections are held, all the machines are checked, right? All the data of the political people are checked, because crimes can happen, right? Because they have done it after seeing all the forecasting data of the previous years. So they have made lot of amendments, they have done lot of maintenance. So all the electronic voting machines, they come from computer forensic industry, basically, right? As you know, even in the US elections, the outgoing President Trump is saying that lot of fraud has happened in the vote counting. It could be the case, we don't know. I'm not commenting anything on that, but we should remember one thing: our systems are doing very, very well in India. We never heard of such a system in the last 25 years after the electronic voting machines have come into picture, right? Because they have all been checked, as it is mentioned here, and all of the data of the political leaders also, like their fingerprint data, their property data also are checked. Because any day, any political leader or their people can steal somebody else's property data, or can add some more data, so that allegations will come on somebody else that it is all illegal property. So property frauds come into picture here, and through a computer machine we can have lot of log files generated, right, to do matching on different kinds of data there. So these are all the legal overviews what we have, basically, right? I will just go into the cyber laws and then end the last 3 or 4 slides there. I will go through the cyber laws now, because we have seen the main points there. Yeah, certain cyber laws which I would like to talk about. I will not talk about all. Cyber laws were introduced in the year 2000. So we did not have any cyber laws. That means laws relating to a source and a destination, where on the source you have a computer machine, on a destination you have a computer machine. These were called as telephonic laws before 2000, when hotline machines were there as telephones. All right. So the IT Act was made. Now, what are these acts? Basically, some of them. So what is a cyber threat? Basically, so no, cyber threat is not a cyber crime. It is not yet committed. So we are forecasting a cyber crime can happen. So a threat is defined as the potential to cause an unwanted incident in which an asset, system, or organization may be harmed. So I've talked about asset, system, organization. Assets are who you know, organization anyway you know, and in the system who and all are there apart from organization and assets. Basically, cyber threat is a threat that percolates or infiltrates through the use of computers, internet, or interconnected communication devices, and could compromise of information steal, cyber warfare, virus attacks, cyber terrorism, hacking attempts, phishing, sabotage, singly or in combination. So when I say cyber terrorism, so these days I should say now bioterrorism is happening, right? Using agriculture. And cyber terrorism was used in the World Trade Center attacks. Right, certain emails were sent, but they were found out after the attacks happened. They checked the emails of all those people who are involved, and they made certain jurisdictions on that. Right, so who could have been the person basically, or which organization was involved, etc., etc. So okay. So types of cyber crimes basically. So hacking, information theft, email bombing, salami attacks, denial of service attacks, Trojan attacks. All these I have already told you. Virus, worms, Trojans, when they will be introduced. Only after the cyber criminal is sitting and when he or she wants to create some harm at the destination. So when he or she does that, indirectly these files will come into picture. Hacking, anyway, we know. Hacking of emails, that's the simplest one, or hacking of accounts, bank accounts of somebody else. So it is on the destination. Both are on destinations, basically, right? Or hacking of property accounts, they're all on destination, where the person is not directly there, whose property it is or whose account it is. So basically, it becomes a remote login for the person, right? The computer is there in the person's house, but his account is being hacked from a bank, basically, right? Then information theft. So information theft is directly linked with hacking, basically. And now email bombing. Now, what do you mean by email bombing? Sometimes what happens is your emails are hijacked, and certain datas are being sent to somebody else. Right, you have never used your email ID for sending that particular data. So we need to do document verification first, what type of document it is, and we need to prove that the email ID sent the source email ID, whether it's true email ID or it is phished, basically. So these are all the different types of crimes what we have now enacted on 17th May. So India is the 12th nation in the world to adopt cyber laws. So we are very young in this matter. We are developed, right? And it is based on a model law on e-commerce adopted by, so this is one trade law here. Objectives. Now it is carried out by means of electronic data interchange and other means of electronic communication to facilitate electronic filing or documents with government agencies and e-payments. So IT Act has got two provisions. One is for events like tax filing, right, or your property dealing filings, right? How much property you have, you show, or property taxes. So this also comes in IT Act, because frauds can happen there. You don't show the correct property, somebody doesn't show the correct property, somebody doesn't show the correct assets. So this can happen in any country. It is not I'm saying in India. So these are all the different possibilities for which the IT Act is there. Another type of IT Act is on the crimes which can harm the other person. So here in the first one, you are creating self-harm, right? So you have two individuals inside you, your real self and the self which you don't mean it to be, and you get into trouble. So this is what this talks about. The other one is basically on the destination. So for that, so you have these many provisions there. Legal recognition to electronic records, section 4, legal recognition of digital signatures. So we will talk about this day after tomorrow. How do you verify the signatures? It's very interesting. When the signature is on the right side, when signature is curving on the left side, when there are breaks in signatures, when there are spaces between characters of signatures, right? What do you mean when somebody signs with one character very huge, the other characters are very, very small? Easy a person who is very anxious, easy a person who is having certain kind of bad mindsets, etc., etc. So it becomes very important to understand these digital signatures, for which we have section 5 of IT Act. Section 6, use of electronic records and digital signatures in government and its agencies. Section 7, retention of electronic records. So these are all the different sections what we have as provisions, basically, right? Now, what are the offenses? What are possible in the IT Act by which the person is liable to be arrested? Tampering with computer source documents, hacking with computer systems, data alteration, publishing obscene informations, unauthorized access to protected systems, right? Breach of confidentiality and privacy, publishing false digital signature certificates. So these are all the different sections what we have. So these are the most important ones. So if you are going to work on the computer forensics and cyber crime, specifically if you're going to work on digital signatures or digital fingerprints or digital faces, or any kind of medical data afterwards linking to it, retinal data or gastrointestinal data, you can know these sections, at least the numbers, so that you know what are the legal applications when you put a case on anybody. Because if the case is false, then there is a counter to these acts. Basically, if the case is false, suppose somebody has not tampered and you say that particular person has tampered, then the other person can put a lawsuit on you that his or her image has been spoiled. So there is a counter for these sections also, basically section 65A, section 66A. So it goes like that, basically, right? So data theft, so this we know basically. Now computer related crimes under IPC, that is yeah. So one is sending threatening messages by email, section 503, sending defamatory messages by email. So these are all the different sections what we have under the Indian Penal Code. This is IPC, right? This is different from this. This is the act. So under the Indian Penal Code, first you see the act and then you apply the penal code and you see kind of action can be given. Say something like in our college, when any copying incident happens, right? So we have got different rules, like what kind of punishments can be given for any kind of mistake done by anybody, basically. So same thing, it goes into legal systems also. So basically you have to first have the acts made by the government of India. Here it's government of India, and then you have the Indian Penal Code. So if you have anything, so these are all, so you can just go through these sections. I'm not required to go through these sections and tell you what really happens if the person who is a suspect and he or she is a suspect. If a person is a suspect but he has been suspected but he or she is not a suspect, so what can go counter, basically, right? So that's what. So there are two main sections, section 65 and section 66. So one is for the source code. Basically, if any source code tampering has been happened, so what kind of punishments can be given, basically. So let us assume, God forbid, these things don't happen, and if hacking happens, what really happens, basically. So these are all the different cyber laws, main cyber laws what we have, basically, right? So at the end, I would just like to, because imaging part already I have told you, right? I'd just like to summarize by saying, right, these are the points, main points. Yeah. So at the end, I would like to summarize. If there is an intrusion, an analysis done, find out the damage, assessment is done, find out the suspect, examine the suspect, whether he or she is a suspect or not, depending on evidences, and then you can put the cyber laws, basically. So you need lot of good evidences from the forensic labs, like fingerprints or faces, basically. Then use certain tools. Tools have to be used for that. So we need computer tools for that, right? Computer tools and even the log file analysis. And the evidence search will be done by the legal experts, basically, when they get the data from the cyber police. So all the evidences they will collect, they will apply the different sections and the IPC codes. So they are all the different sections in the cyber laws, what I showed you, some of them, and the Indian penal codes, finally, to charge that particular person that he or she is a criminal under which section and under which IPC code, basically. And if at all that person is acquitted, is somebody liable for this person to be charged? Acquitted means that person is released of that particular crime. So the court says, no, he or she has not committed. So do we have to look at the victim and the witness or the organization from where this particular crime request has come? So whether that organization has to be charged or the witness or the victim or the victim, usually it will not happen. Usually nobody will be held responsible. So the court will say this person has been released, at least in the Indian conditions. So at last but not the least, in computer forensics and cyber forensics, I'm not talking about cyber security here. That's not the aim of my talk. So these are the main parts what are involved, basically. Take care of these points and work on digital fingerprints and digital faces, because these two are the main evidences. Digital fingerprints by touch, digital faces through a surveillance camera, and because these will be produced in the court, right? What kind of touching object was that? If it was the ground, collect the soil. If it was a book, take the book. What type of surveillance camera was used? Resolutions, etc., etc. So these are all the evidences given by the cyber police. So depending on which, we can make a judgment. Now, in the next talk of mine, what I'm going to show is how do we do the technical analysis? How do we work on fingerprints? Stool analysis, basically, right? How do we do that? Or how do we do a facial analysis? Today afternoon, I'll show you one small demo. Right? So fingerprint analysis and facial analysis on digital data is very, very important, basically. So before I do the demos, today there will be a detailed talk on computer forensics and by Dr. Shankar Baknawar. Then we will be having the lab session, what I call online demo, basically. If you have any questions, and I told you tomorrow what I'm going to talk about. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about biometrics and computer forensics. Some part of biometrics I showed today, and there'll be a talk on differential privacy. So if any information has been tampered by, at the source, what kind of noise has been introduced at the source by the person? Is it good noise or is it some obscene data which has been introduced? That's steganography I told, right? Inside an image, putting something else and sending and harming the destination person. So differential privacy, right? So these will be two talks tomorrow. Then day after tomorrow, we'll be having graphology, the most important talk. How do we interpret signatures, documents written by different people? We will give you live examples, live case studies. And then we will be doing certain quizzes in the morning itself, day after tomorrow. And afternoon, there'll be a talk on AI and computer forensics by Dr. Ashwini from Forensic Medicine and Toxicology. So we'll be culminating with AI, artificial intelligence. And then once again, there'll be a lab demo, right? Okay, if you have any questions and if it is under my jurisdiction, I am surely happy to answer them. Right. Akshay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Participants, any questions?
So my
Hello,
session
sir.
does not end here. It's in a team. We are going to continue from afternoon. Yes, please. Any questions?
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. It's me, Amarnath. I'm working as an assistant professor in Jain University, Bangalore.
Sir,
Computer
just
science
louder,
department.
please. Louder, sir. Louder, louder, louder. Yeah, tell me.
Hello, sir. It's me, Amarnath. I'm working as an assistant professor in the computer science department in Jain University, Bangalore.
Yeah, tell me.
Uh, I was seeing your presentations, pretty good, but I'm having some questions related to this forensics. Like, how does the forensic help in financial institutions as well as in some of the crime investigations? Like most of the crime is happening nowadays through either through financial institution or else through any of the medical or else through any of the individual fraud is happening. How this can be controlled? Any solutions for this?
If you remember, I said one thing is to do a forecasting. Say, suppose today, if a crime has happened, so we should have done a forecasting on this particular crime which happened today, say around 10 years back or 5 years back. Write one forecasting algorithm. Say a simple crime, something like your credit card has been hacked. You got my point, Amarnath. Your credit card has been hacked, and some amount stolen. Right now, we need to have the different possibilities of how the credit card can be used, right, by different sets of people. So for that, we need to find out the different personalities involved, and this will be done by psychologists, by anxious people, by normal people, by schizophrenic people, by depressive people, by anxious people, by maniac people, by panic people. So there are different categories of people in human psychiatry, right, or human psychology. And these are the people who use these credit cards. It includes me, it includes you. All of us are human beings, but we have different personalities. So what type of usages are possible on the credit card? So this is what is called business forecasting. It's a forecasting tool which we have to use. Say something like time series analysis, Box-Jenkins method, right? We have to find out the intervals. Like say in the year 2016 January to 2016 December, these many people in India have used credit cards in State Bank of India, Manipal branch. These many people have used, and you make one report on that. How many people have done transactions? Like how many people have bought goods of above 1 lakh, above 50,000, and then even you try to find out any frauds were there. And once you try to find out any type of frauds are there, from whose credit card the fraud has happened. So first try to find out how that particular person was using the credit card. Record all these things. So when you write a program, you need to make rules for all these things. Basically, I'm talking about credit card frauds because here you don't have any fingerprints, basically, right? One thing is that. The second thing is when a credit card fraud happens, say suppose, what type of data in the credit card is being misused? Did you get my point, Amarnath? What kind of data? Is it
Yes,
the
sir.
credit card ID number, or is it any kind of because nowadays credit card have a small chip also, right, Amarnath? A small chip is
Yes, sir.
there.
Yes, yes,
So
yes, sir.
inside that chip, if any hidden information is there, say facial data is there, right, or any kind of in any other kind of say data, something like which talks about this person's investments. This person has a in America, it is there. In America, Europe, they store all this data. This person has made an investment in Goldman Sachs. So the person who is committing a crime can find out all these informations. So basically, you have to forecast all these possibilities. Say on a credit card, different permutations and combinations. That is what is called stitching in computer forensics. Stitching of data, stitching of possibilities of crime data. So I talked about this one credit card, right? So this is relating to finances. Now about healthcare. Let me talk about healthcare. It's very interesting, a very good question what you have asked, and I'll just come back, right? Just give me 1 minute time here. I'll just share some data here, which I can show you. It becomes interesting to show that, right? Okay, all right. Now look at this. These are not data of any criminals here, but where is it? Ah. Now you look at this. I have retinal data of the same person taken over a period of time. Can you see, Amarnath?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
This is for the same person. See the features. It is for the same person. This once again of another. You see, same person. These are forensic data. Data over a period of time. Can you see? Same person.
Yes, yes, sir.
Can you see? This is same person. You see?
Yes, sir.
These
Yes.
are all. These
Yes,
are all
sir.
for diabetic patients anyway. So these you see these three.
Mhm.
You see this. So I'll talk about this little bit anyway. Healthcare. Good question you asked me. Very valid one. Can you see same? Now, when you take the healthcare data, say, what happens is, I'll give you an example. Suppose a person now is normal and he wants to commit a crime because he gets angry on somebody else. He wants to commit a murder. So what usually happens is in healthcare, the person takes certain kind of drugs, like marijuana, cannabis, and it can have a lot of detrimental effects on the different organs of the body, specifically the retinal data. It can change, right? So in computer forensics, there are two things. One thing is to predict. You have to predict any guy, he or she, how many times he or she will be normal, and if at all, if anybody wants to commit a crime, what kind of crimes are possible. So this is one way of looking at it. So you forecast, but after forecasting, still things can happen wrong. So once things happen wrong, it's a feed forward and a feed backward mechanism. So if something has gone wrong, something like when the World Trade Center came falling down, now systems are made so that now you cannot attack buildings. You put lights on the top of the building. That is one way. Another way is automate, keep a look through surveillance cameras. So basically, I am not saying, my claim is not that crimes can be stopped. Your point is very much valid, but we can make forecasting algorithms to find all the possibilities of crimes, say in finance organizations, say in healthcare, something like when you have retinal data. If you have retinal data, it can get affected in how many ways? A person can be normally diabetic, so retina can get affected, but not by committing crime. High blood pressure can get affected. But sometimes, I'll give you an example for this. Amarnath, listen to me. In Nepal, one guy in the army, he was found out to be having high blood pressure. So if you have high blood pressure in the army, your promotions will be stopped till you get cured. So he was sent to All India Institute of Medical Sciences. saying that he put a case in the court saying that I don't have high blood pressure. So he was sent to AIMS for a checkup, cross examination. So in AIMS, when they were doing cross examination, he was put in wards. So in the wards, his blood pressure was normal, right? Whereas the doctor in Nepal is telling he's having high blood pressure. Then he was put in ICU. So when he was put in the ICU, his blood pressure shot up. You know what's the reason for that? The reason is in the ICU, he can't take medicines. The nurse has to give the medicines. Whereas in wards, his lawyers told him in Nepal. So when you are sent to AIMS, you in the ward, you only take the medicines. Nobody can see. But he did not know he'll be sent to ICU. So you see how a person who was supposed not to be committing a crime has committed a crime. Did you get my point, Amarnath? Did you get
Yes,
what I'm
sir.
saying?
Yes, sir.
So this is
Yes,
manually
yes,
you look
I
at it. Yeah. Now you can
Ah.
automate it. So when you automate, you put this rule and you add it in the maintenance part, and it goes on basically. So the answer to your question is, first you make a forecasting mechanism to find out all the different possibilities of normalcy and criminal data, because many of us are normal. I am saying I am normal. We are all normal. God forbid anything happens to us. I'm talking academically. Please bear with me. But if at all anybody, right, is having any criminal instincts, that God forbid it happens, and if any crime happens which is not recorded in the forecasting chart, then you add it and go again. So it's a feed forward and a feed backward mechanism. So a lot of deep learning algorithms are being applied basically here. Convolutional neural networks, recursive neural networks, to go on modifying the forecasting chart, that what can happen, good or bad, right? So that's the answer. Even these days, in the last 7 to 8 years, there have been cases where planes are not found. Malaysian Airlines 370, the plane is not found, right? So a lot of drones are being made now, and the forecasting mechanisms are being changed to find out the new methods in which the planes can go not seen, basically. So that's the answer to your question, basically. I'm all right. Okay, next.
Sir, hello, sir.
Yeah.
One more question, no problem.
Yeah.
Sir, nowadays, people are sharing their data everywhere. Like either it might be on the social media like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Naukri, or else I'm going to check any of the app in my phone. Like I'm going to install any of the apps, so that the app of that particular build application, it is asking the data of your phone or else of your location, everything. Like suppose if I want to make a pay from my Google Pay account, it is asking for your location first. Then you can make the payment. So like each and every time the companies are taking our data. So if in future it is going to be breached, what is the security for the people?
In future, if it is going to be breached, so the answer to your question is, the organization which is asking your data, is it a fake organization? You got my point? The organization which is asking your data, the organization which is asking, you are doing some transaction, right, Amarnath? You are doing certain transaction. I'm talking generally speaking here, not particular. So if you are doing any transaction with any organization, the organization, if it is, which many a times, see, this is what is called false positive, true positive, false negative, true negative, the statistical parameters. You got my point? So the organization with whom you are doing a transaction, if it is real, then the data sharing will not be a problem. And that too, the person who is asking for the data, right, in the organization, Amarnath. If the person who is asking for the data from you, he or she is intending to commit a crime, it happens in big organizations. It happens in big software companies all over the world, but not in a big number, right? So we should not assume that. Sometimes it happens because, see, the populations are so huge. So if at all it happens, we need to find out first who, from where it is happening. Many a times it will not happen from the organizations. It will happen from some people who are interacting with you. So your question is very valid. When you are sharing data, even if the organization is valid with whom you want to share your data, you need to find out who the person. Like, I'll give you an example. Recently, I had to get one small parcel from DHL. DHL, you know DHL, right? It took almost 3 to 4 months. The parcel has come in Bangalore, but they have not yet sent it to Manipal. And then I called, and then they said, we will put you with one of our colleagues. The colleague called me, and that colleague from DHL was talking in a very bad language, and he said that you have to pay 5,000 rupees online. He sent me the email ID, everything is sent, DHL name was there, everything, like your example only. Authentic email I got from DHL, pay 5,200 rupees and then the customs will clear it. That person was a good person, but the way he was talking, no, I got suspicion whether this person who is speaking from DHL is he the correct person with DHL. So once again, I called that employees, the help desk in DHL. The employee with whom you put me up is not talking properly. Then then the case got clarified. I got emails, but still I am waiting till I get my parcel. I'm not sure. So the answer to your question are in two folds. One is it depends on the organization, right? And usually you have to trust that particular organization because it is you who is doing the transaction, right? But during the COVID times, you cannot physically go and check also, right? You have to do it online. So the answer to your question is on a level of abstraction. That is point number two. The level of abstraction is you have to believe in God, right? And most of the times you will get, yeah, there's no other answer, but that's what I said, two folds. One fold is you directly know what is going on. But during these time, it is COVID-19, right? You have to believe in God. You cannot have any algorithm because you are far away. Even Bangalore looks to me like it is New York now. Till I get my, this is a Toastmaster good what I have to get. But I'm going to get it. That is what my third eye tells me, or third sense tells me. So that's what, nothing else. I understood what you are saying. Sharing of data. It will ask for sharing certain data, your photographs, correct? Your photographs, they will ask for sharing, or certain kind of password, not passwords. What other data? I don't remember. But mainly photographs to be shared and all. So if you share, they can be misused on the other side. Right, so that can happen, but that is a remote possibility. So the probability of that thing happening is, it depends on the organization and mainly on the person who is doing it. Right.
Okay. And even in the hello sir, and even some of the fake websites and fake apps are coming, so that they are asking money from the people, and if you swipe, that money is going to be debited from your account.
So let me give you an answer. Let me give an answer to this question of yours. Many a times I keep getting calls. So what I do is I cut the call. I don't answer at all. I don't answer at all. They tell that ICICI ये है, HDFC में आपका ये है, वो है. Shrikant Prabhu sir, ये है आपके पास. One some lady will call, or some girl will call, or some boy will call. Many times on phone they will call, or on WhatsApp they will call. So as my brain works now, I think that I'm doing it from last 15 years. Once even I was in trouble with the credit card, right? But that problem was solved. But I don't take the risk of answering or sending any emails until and unless I have a cross verification, like what I did in DHL. I cross verified with the other employees there. And then my third eye told me, yes, I can go ahead. So the best way is prevention is cure. Prevention is cure. So it's healthcare. It is a digital healthcare. It is human healthcare. What do you mean by digital healthcare? You are working with the world. You are buying goods. You are talking to people. So digital healthcare is prevention is cure. Chat when required, what is required, and send data what is required when required. And with critical information, be careful. Say no when required. That's all. These are the words from Dr. Devi Shetty, right? I'm just transferring it to you, right? So
okay.
yeah, I hope I am right. I hope I am right, because there is no other way out otherwise.
Right, sir.
Yeah, technically speaking, to write any algorithm for this, perhaps, I don't know. We might have to wait for another pandemic to happen. Once again, I say, God forbid it happens. But if at all it happens, might be there will be another internet which will come into existence, which will have all the solutions for this world, which is happening today with the current internet. So that might become very recursive in nature, but it's a very hot debate, right? We can have a lot of points on this and we can debate and we can have answers. But at the end of the day, technically, if you don't want to answer and you cannot answer, you have to say prevention is better than cure. But a very good question what you have asked, Amarnath, right? Very valid, right?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
So myself, Sunil Kumar from Nilet, Jammu. I have three questions.
Yeah.
First one is regarding the virtualization, regarding how to track the people who are committing cyber crimes through virtual machines. Second is regarding the
And let me answer your first question. If you want to find out who has committed the crime, it is not you who will investigate. You have to put a FIR with the cyber police. You
No, sir.
have to put.
Yes, sir. But sir, in case of crimes done on through virtual machines, if someone has installed some virtual machine like VMware or VMbox, because they can be easily deleted.
Even for virtual machines, it's the cyber police who will see virtual machines also. If they do, you are saying what virtual IDs will be created, right?
Yes, sir. Suppose we have installed a virtual machine, VMware, VirtualBox. I have installed another operating system within a system, and through that a person do a crime, cyber crime. How to track in that case?
That, see, you have to have the root ID. Root ID, if it is recorded with the machine from where the virtual machines were created. But once again, that you cannot do it. You have to put this case with the cyber police, because cyber police, what they do is, if you put the IP address on Google, you'll come to know the region from where those things are being done, right?
Yes, sir.
10.110. You'll come to know the region. You will come to know which company that particular internet dongle belongs to whom, right? Or that particular whatever it is, whichever type of device has been used. So basically, this problem will be solved by the cyber police only. But if virtual machines are involved, I'm pretty not sure whether these cases can be solved and how many cases have been solved. Right? Your question is very valid. I understood what you are saying. The true machine is not being used, virtual machines, and inside that you are creating operating systems.
Yes,
I
sir. Yes.
spoke about that, creating
Exactly.
operating systems, right? You create your own, you steal from
Yes.
somebody else. I spoke about that, basically creating pseudo operating systems and doing that. But I'm pretty not sure like how many. But this might be. I'm going to put this in my next talk. I need to see the statistics, like how many cases have been solved in these by the cyber police. Because once again, when the cyber police tracks it, when they track the IP address and the machine and the organization from where it has been done, so a lot of records will. But I don't know. I don't know like whether it is successful. But how it is done is the procedure is same, tracking all the IDs, going from virtual ID to the true ID. It is the same thing basically. It's a recursive loop. But how much successful it is, I don't know. I don't know about that. Means you are talking about false softwares being used.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
This,
The second
this,
question
this,
is regarding
yeah,
the
tell me.
second question is regarding the volatile memory forensics or forensics on the volatile memory.
Forensics on volatile. What do you want to know on that?
On RAM, sir. Actually, on the hard disk we can recover data or what kind of activities are done. But is it possible on RAMs?
They're correct. So suppose say if there is a case in the court, so they will ask the whole machine to be produced in the court. So when they ask the whole machine to be produced in the court, all the components have to be produced. So there will be a computer specialist from the company where the computer has been bought. Even for aeroplanes, right? When aeroplane crashes will happen, if they find the parts, they will send it to the company from where the aeroplane was bought. Same thing. So from the place where the computer was bought, say HCL, a person will be called. They will open the machine. So the RAM also will be checked, because how many times the RAM was accessed, right? All these things. So that will be done in forensic lab before coming to court. In the court, they'll just put the evidence. They'll put the evidence that these many times. The same thing for the answer to your question. Last question was the same thing. The evidence is there, but I'm for the last question, I'm not pretty sure, or like how many times the cases have been solved. But for this question, RAM, yes, it will be produced. But whether you can solve the case or not solve the case, it depends on how strong the evidences are. How strong the evidences are. The surveillance camera, how clear the images are. I've seen it in FSL in Delhi. Second is RAM. RAMs also, they can be erased, right?
Yes.
All the things in the RAM, they can be erased, random access memory. But even if they are erased, if it is a network, then are those temporary files being stored in the servers? You can check all that, right? All the temporary files. That was the part of my talk also. Temporary files, the other files, and etc. basically. Right. So once again, so it depends on how strong the evidences are, basically. Right.
Thank you,
So
sir. Excellent speech you have, sir. Thank you.
if you're interested, you can work with me in future also, right? Even
Okay,
I
sir.
want to learn many things.
It's my pleasure, sir.
All the best wishes to all of you. Anybody else?
Sir, good afternoon.
Yeah.
So this is Avinash. Sir,
Yeah,
I
tell
have
me.
one couple of questions actually, sir. That we hear news such as accounts of millions of users are being hacked, being sold for some money in dark web. So what do the buyers in the dark web do with this kind of data? That is first question.
What is that? Repeat
Second,
it. Repeat it. Repeat it.
sir, I'll repeat, sir. So we
Uh,
hear news such as accounts of millions of users are
uh,
hacked and being sold for some money in dark web,
uh,
right? So what do the buyers in the dark web do with this do with this kind of data?
uh.
And that is my first question. Second question is, so to conduct any good forensic study, we need a lot of digital data. And right, sir, can we integrate use of some other computer technology such as deep learning or in cybercrime and digital
Yeah,
forensics to
yeah,
predict?
see, Avinash, let me answer your second question first. When you say deep learning, it is not actually deep learning. You start with AI, artificial intelligence. AI uses machine learning. What is AI? It is outside the mind. It uses machine learning. Outside the mind means looking at the machine. Machine learning uses neural networks because any machine you assume it to be an artificial brain. So you look at neurons as it is in the brain outside, activation states, activation functions, and you create other things. So basically what happens is if you use just a neural network, when your data set is huge, because any digital data or digital forensic data is very huge, it's big data, right? Am I right, Avinash? It's a big data. It is
Yes, sir.
countably infinite. So when it is a big data and there are a lot of recursions involved, feed forward, feed backward, feed forward, feed backward, and many a times you will not have the crisp answers, you will get fuzzy answers. So a target output and the observed output has to come very, very close. So what do? We basically take the data as a point, then 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, 9 points, it becomes a matrix, right? 12 points, 15 points, 16 points, 4 by 4 matrix. So basically what are we doing? We are looking at a mask and then we apply a filter, mask, filter, filter, mask, mask, filter. So that becomes a convolution. So what do you mean by convolutional neural network? Basically all the forensic data which are in terms of digital formats, you take as a point and you grow them, you make them big. 1 point to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to say 65536. Now when you say 65536 data also between the first and second also something is happening, right? So that's what it is. So digital data has got lots of informations. And when you say in the computer forensics, you need to prove that whatever evidence has been given against a suspect, you have to prove that. So to prove that, you need a very correct answer. Your target output and the observed output has to come very, very close. Target is what you know. Observed is you are creating it. So deep learning is a must. Without deep learning, you cannot, because you take any image, it has got countably infinite possibilities, right? Between first pixel and second pixel, all the intensities, variations, so many things, right? So many things will happen. So deep learning is a must to get better answers. Basically, I'm not saying perfect answers, right? So there's a what the first question was, uh, Avinash.
Sir, I'll repeat the question. Like
First,
I've recently I also heard the news. Like I would just name some big basket users data. Like 2 million users data has
uh,
been hacked and being sold for 30 lakhs in the dark web. So I want to know, sir, what do the buyers in the dark web do with this kind of data? Are they trying to make money out of the data?
but was it the people who hacked it? They were doing it for stealing.
So that I'm not sure.
Because I don't know. You are saying hacked, right? You are saying hacked, right?
Yes, sir. I read it on the news, sir.
You are saying hacked. So let me just think about it. So data have been stolen by somebody,
So
and
it's like a sort of Excel file where the account numbers, credit card information, username, mobile phone numbers, address, all those details were present.
was it for an organization? Was it for any organization? The
Yes, sir.
data?
Yes, sir.
It was for an organization, right? And the
Users
data
of
was
an
hacked.
organization.
So one point why they have hacked is to malign the organization. To malign the organization. right? One thing is that if the data security is not there in any particular organization, one thing is to malign. It is something like in Amway what happened. Do you remember in Amway, Avinash? Amway.
Sir, I'm not sure.
In Amway, the same thing happened. Basically, Amway, the logic is you make a friend, right? And you tell that particular friend to buy certain goods from Amway. So you get certain points. Then you tell that friend to make another 3 friends. It's a chain of friends basically, right? And you
Yes,
go
sir.
on buying goods like scents, trousers, shirts, etc., whatever daily goods you have. At last, many people have become rich. It seems. Even I went for the seminars. Finally, the CEO of Amway was caught. He was an American, and in India only he was caught by the Indian cyber police. So what happened was, when they were doing this kind of transaction, some of the personal information they were grabbing. You got my point? Suppose say I make a friend and I tell my friend through computer, I make that friend through computer, Avinash, right? And
So
I
it
give
could be
certain
example of
information.
social engineering, right?
Yeah, social engineering. Yes, basically yes. Even your point is social engineering only. No, what you said, that first question.
Yes, sir.
You got my point. So basically what happens is, it is like you are a friend of mine or I am your friend, but on the back I cheat you, like that. Basically, so anybody can do it. I'm not saying I will cheat you, please bear with me, right? I'm just putting the case study because I'm sitting in front of you so I can understand. So basically, when you make a chain, it's like a data structure. It's a tree. It's a tree structure. Basically, you can interpret that tree in terms of a linked list or a stack or a queue. Now, who is whose friend? Now we need to do top down or bottom up. So what usually happens is, one particular friend is having a criminal mindset. So what he or she will do, he will steal information from your computer, all the personal. So what happens is a recursive phenomenon, because your computer has got information of others also, right? Correct or no? Others also is there, because it's a chain of friends you're having in that Excel sheet, right? Who is friend of this fellow is friend of this fellow, like that. So what happens, by stealing your information, other friends informations also will be stolen. So what happens, some of the personal information which that particular criminal wanted, that particular person can get. Basically, what can be the personal information which can help that criminal to put you down? They can be anything, like they can be something like how many leaves you are having in the organization, right? So what that person will do, he will modify that Excel sheet basically, and he will reduce the number of leaves. So tomorrow when you go to the boss, you get scoldings. How you put the leave and you're not entered there? So got my point, Avinash? So basically what happens is, when they hack the data, in this case money is involved. They are not hacking for getting the money, but they are hacking for getting certain personal information from some set of people basically, right? So it happens on the higher levels basically. This is what is my view. I hope I'm clear, Avinash.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Thank you, Akshay.
Okay, sir. That was a very good and informative session on cyber forensics and law, cyber laws. I'm sure that the participants have been very much benefited. So, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank you for this informative session, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akshay, and all my colleagues in INCD department for giving me this opportunity. And we'll continue this in the afternoon, tomorrow and day after. And thanks to all the participants. Best wishes. Anyway, I'm there in the afternoon, tomorrow and day after. Do well. Right. Thank
Yes,
you very
sir.
much.
Thank you so much.
We'll meet
Thank
at
you.
2. Akshay, 2 o'clock.
Yes, sir. For the participants, link will be shared soon, and we'll get back together at around at 2 o'clock today.
Can we start at
Thank.
2:15 around? Because I'll have lunch and come 2:10 like that. Akshay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No problem. 2 to 10 will
I'll,
start.
yeah. Bye.
Okay, sir. Bye bye.